Thank you, Seth, and thank you everyone for having me here. I was talking to Mark right now, and it's Thursday at RTOG Foundation meeting. It's pretty much a lot of senior investigators, so me telling you how to get people involved is a bit rich. But if I can, tell Dr. Curran how to be a new investigator, that'd be fantastic. But I'll just try to be more humble than that. And so, my disclosures are here, none relevant today. But I think, as a radiation oncologist starting out nowadays, I think Dr. Higgins was touching upon this, the impetus to involve folks as clinical researchers earlier, thinking of themselves as having academic careers is becoming more and more important to do it early before their attention turns to the many other pressures that are on them, whether it be clinical productivity, other research careers, other easier things for them to do than being a clinical investigator serving patients for the long term, which is what RTOG and NRG does. I think in terms of my path to getting to be a part of this cooperative group, NRG, and now at the RTOG Foundation through Seth's fine works, have really come from the usual things that get us all to where we are in our careers, which is the phone calls you take. And Dr. Rosenthal probably doesn't remember this, but a phone call about a decade and a half ago to a random med student thinking about oncology, saying you should go into radiation oncology. That was him. Because randomly, my cousins went to school with his kids. And then it carries on, right? Like these impetus of who do you see yourself like in your career? So for me, as a resident, I think in terms of telling you perhaps the point of this talk should then be more about what has really resonated with me as a junior investigator, that of all the efforts you all have put into me, has been things like relationships and appreciation of what the NRG, RTOG, historical legacy organizations have done for our field. These foundational data we always quote to each other in the resident room are really cooperative data. I think it's important to have a historical perspective as we train our students and residents and how you build this data over time. The flashiest thing in front of us in terms of our research papers is not what may not be there in 20 years, but the slow building of that knowledge through clinical trials is relevant, is important, is worth it. I think that was in credit to Dr. Rosenthal, Dr. Zalewski, who always taught me as a resident to not assume what's in front of us is what's the standard of care 10 years from now. Dr. Solid, medical oncologist, who as a translational researcher really took on folks beyond medical oncology, made a point to have radiation oncologists and urologists in his lab. And I think seeing perspectives beyond our own is very important more than ever in multidisciplinary research. Certainly, I think if you walk into OR, I have my residents go hop on over after a brachycase, the radical prostatectomies and cystectomies. They have no idea what we're doing. One of our world-class urologists told me you can't treat the ureter with radiation. And I told him, what do you think happens every time we do post-op radiation? And I've learned a lot about surgery from him, and we've kind of worked on a pre-op bladder radiation trial that's going to happen next year because of a lot of these conversations. So I think having that crossover is so important in our training, and I think so many of you would have so many to offer, the urologists, the surgeons, the medical oncologists, if we just had them maybe see part of our trial development, not only just our clinics, perhaps. Certainly as a new faculty, I think you all lead departments, or many of you lead departments in which you have many new clinical faculty. I don't need to tell you how to promote their careers, but I feel like many folks just don't see themselves as researchers or clinical researchers. After 6 to 12 months go by, they start seeing their colleagues talk about all their new grants on Twitter or on other X or whatever you want to call it. And it's just not true, right? You just need to build your clinical acumen, your expertise, ask the right questions over and over, keep refining them with the right mentorship, and you'll get there eventually. And I think certainly my chair, Dr. Timmerman, has always been about clinical investigations. I always tell him I need a few years to catch up with him because I think he's crazy sometimes, but he's been right. Most of the things he tells me to do has been irrelevant. And I think having that atmosphere is so, so important. And I think we all have it upon us to promote that in our departments. I think as an NRG investigator, this has been the easiest part. Everyone always says just show up and it'll work out if you just have interest. It's been true. I showed up because NRG happened to be in Dallas for a meeting about 8-9 years ago, and Felix Fang was taking over and obviously introduced me to all the many investigators, including Dr. Mahalski and Dr. Sandler. And after a few years, through no effort of my own, there was literally no effort of my own, opportunities to be a part of research that I would never thought my career was going to go that way. And so Dr. Fang, I obviously owe a lot to, but this openness at the GU committee, at the NRG, has been very important. I think that is a quality I think cannot be stated enough. It seems easy, seems cheap, but just get people in the room is the first step. What have senior investigators done for me beyond this, or more specifically has helped? I think providing perspective, right? I think always have our idea based on the most recent paper we read about what we want to ask a question on, but we have no idea what has not worked 10, 15 years ago, what many trial ideas were pitched and did not work out, or maybe did work out, and we just haven't heard the results yet. I think having perspective on where the field has gone and how it's got to this point, and what ideas were there, but we didn't have the technology to execute yet, or perhaps the biology wasn't there yet, I think those questions don't go away. They just need to be repopulated once we have the right timing for it. And I think having senior investigators give that historical perspective in our meetings, in our research presentations is very important for that. Certainly agenda and timelines, I think being at the right time is very important for something. As a junior investigator, I can't possibly know that most of the time unless you're very smart people like Dan Spratt, et cetera, who know how to be in the right time all the time. But I think, having ancillary projects constantly to be discussed, Food Tran does this very well, the GU committee, a very open discussion about here's how the translational concept started, here's how it ended, here's what's in progress. That's really nice to hear, even for the stuff that didn't actually pan out. I think the push, again, helping clinical faculty think themselves as trialists early on, showing examples of success. It's not, if I could do it, then many of your junior colleagues could easily do it. Dr. Yang's here from my institution, and he's doing better than me already. And that's a good demonstration how low the bar is if you guys got me involved. And finally, certainly openness. The activation energy has to get lower and lower to be trialist nowadays, because the activation energy to do nothing and be a clinician, even if you're in academic departments, is super low right now. And I think we got to find ways for folks to be investigators at earlier points. They have that fulfillment and pride in what they do. Otherwise, they leave institutions, and this is not meant to be a Machiavellian thing, but Dr. Mishra and I were talking about, we don't leave institutions because you put 5 years into a trial, you don't want to leave anymore. One of the best ways to retain people is give them a reason to stay there, and I think being a part of the clinical trials process and changing our field has been a big one. And these are very high-value meetings. To go to an NRG meeting, I think it truly is. I'm surprised that people don't think of it that way. Lastly, I think when we recruit one investigator, you should recruit their trainees or their co-residents. We have a lot of peer impact on our careers. We train once, but we remember it a lot. I think we have lots of co-resident memories. Everyone's been talking about, Dr. McDay was talking about today. Those folks are going to drive your career going forward. And certainly if you involve one person, think about the people they train with. That's a network you build together that self-reinforces their careers go on. I think it's always great when we mentor students and residents together as a group. It seems like they do better than if they're off on their own, and then the other person feels like, oh, I'm not involved. Certainly that's worked in our group. Dr. Zumsang, Dr. Spratt are luminaries amongst our resident class doing smart things, saying smart things. I'm the JanSport backpack being carried here and metaphorically by them and others. Finally, being part of great teams, right? So if you're going to QA 2,000 cases together, you better like each other. And so I think the GU group, NRG, has done a really good job putting good teams together, a mixture of people who make sure trials get enrolled, as well as a mixture of senior and junior investigators, people who have time to actually QA cases. Can't speak enough about Joanne Hunter, who's not here, but gosh, she keeps us on time and makes the experience pleasant. And so I really appreciate what you guys all have done for us and making sure we have the right teams in place. Finally, it's fun to kind of be at meetings where you don't know what's going on and slowly integrate yourself. There's lots of social miscues. If someone calls you by not your first name, or you call someone not by their first name properly, it's okay. I could be Nick Desai for 2 years. I was Nick Desai for 2 years. It was okay. you say, yes, Dr. Sassial, I'm interested in bladder research. I love it. And it's okay if it's a little awkward. The next meeting's coming in 6 months, and you can slowly change your name over time. True story. Finally, I think the perseverance aspect, right? A lot of us expect to get our R1 out the door right away, get your grants. This is a long-term game. You start having kids, you're having family, you want to be happy, and this has got to be a marathon you can run for the long term. And I think having the right guidance on what is worth persevering on for the senior investigators is so important. And also cutting the string on things that are not. I think the simplest question I've been told sometimes is, how much have you done for this quote-unquote key research you want to do? Well, I haven't done anything 6 months. Well, clearly that's not that important to you. Cut it out of your career. Harsh words from Hawk Choi, but those are the good ones I've always got from him. That worked really well. This is my son's dolphin electric thing I got from at Disney World and tried to rebuild for 2 days, and my wife said, stop it, it's dead. So. And finally, of course, it's always fun to be part of a family, bring this in the process, and Thank you for Orlando. I think I already told our leader here that this is a good place to have meetings, but my family's coming tomorrow, so thank you. Thank you, everyone.